Hey guys, Tyler Ansman here with Tyler Ansman Performance. So today we're going to talk about a specific throwing drill, how we can make a meaningful impact on the changes we're trying to make to the throwing pattern. And then we're just going to give kind of a brief review of what makes a quality arm action, and then how we go about making kind of movement pattern changes in general, what a constraints-led approach is. Okay, so to start off, let's just kind of review what an elite arm action looks like. What are the different qualities that kind of make up, a high velocity arm action? So the first would be what the arm swing looks like. How is kind of that rhythm and smoothness? Are we taking that momentum from the downswing up into flip up and all the way through arm acceleration? Or are there kind of these breaks and hitches in the arm swing? Right? So we want it to be as smooth as possible, take that momentum straight through the whole time, no breaks. That's kind of the first piece we're looking for. The second piece is the horizontal abduction and retraction. So where are we at flip up? How deep are we back here, right? So the optimal depth is going to kind of vary athlete to athlete. I wrote a whole kind of article on this topic that I'll kind of link in the comments below. But what you're going to kind of see is that most people on the high velocity end of the spectrum are going to get pretty close to optimal for themselves. Again, this will vary to some degree, but if we can kind of get to this kind of optimal range that we're looking for, what we're going to do is we're going to maximize kind of that stretch across the pec, and we're going to get this reflexive firing of the arm forward. It's going to pull the arm through. All right, so the next piece that we're looking at is kind of this elbow flexion angle. And so we're going to be at 90 degrees plus or minus kind of 10 degrees either direction. And what that's going to kind of do at flip up, it's going to allow the arm to be moved very fast. So we've essentially shortened this lever. It's going to shorten a bit more as we're kind of accelerated through. And then we're going to begin to extend again as we start applying force to the baseball. All right, but we want to get right around that 90-degree mark so the arm can be efficiently accelerated. All right, the next piece is going to be layback, right? So that kind of famous picture of Billy Wagner being like basically parallel to the ground. Around that 180-degree mark is roughly what is generally associated with the high velocity throwers. Obviously, again, I've discussed this topic in the past as well, right? You're going to see some differences between kind of these different athlete archetypes and what is optimal for them. Jacob deGrom and prime Noah Syndergaard, they looked very different in terms of what their layback looked like. But typically, we're going to be fairly close to 180 degrees for most of these guys. What we're kind of after here is that kind of pre-stretch of the internal rotators where we're going to get it, kind of launching back forward. If you think back to that old movie, Rookie of the Year, where he breaks his arm and then, starts throwing 105. That's kind of like an oversimplification of what we're looking for with that pre-stretch into layback. All right, and that last piece, ball release. So what are we looking for at ball release? We're looking for aggressive rotation through ball release, this late launch, so the arm kind of releasing the ball in front of the plane of the shoulders, right? We're looking for this kind of well-timed, aggressive intent right at the end. We don't want this early intent where we're muscling up, right? When we see these guys who go from, 80 miles an hour at 80% effort to 81 at 100% effort or 79 at 100% effort, what we're seeing is muscling up, this kind of poorly timed intent, this over-exaggeration of tension a little bit too early. If we could time this well, it's kind of the last piece we're looking for, that aggressive pull down, that snap at the end of the whip. That's what we're looking for from ball release. All right, so now that we've kind of reviewed what high quality, arm action looks like as an example, let's kind of talk about how do we go about making a change to this piece of the puzzle, all right, and what kind of approach would we use? So one of the approaches that we use is called a constraints-led approach. And so essentially what we're looking at with a constraints-led approach is we're breaking down this movement into a couple of pieces, right? But really, constraints are going to be a variety of things. So we have a couple different categories. But primarily, when we're dealing with things that we can actually control, it's going to be environmental constraints and task constraints. All right, and generally, when you're talking about this and like stuff that you probably see on social media, we're talking about task constraints more than anything else. But essentially, what we're doing is when we use a constraints-led approach, we're setting up the guardrails, right, with a drill or kind of movement problem that we're giving the athlete. And then we're saying, okay, you have a relatively narrow kind of window of how you're going to be able to solve this problem and kind of complete the task as this is designed. All right, and so then gradually over time, if we continue to give them these varying constraints, we can kind of funnel them towards the bandwidth of the movement pattern that we're looking for, rather than kind of where they are at the current moment. So like as an example, a task constraint, if we're looking at how do we get that forearm fly out, so like when we're well beyond that 90 degrees plus or minus 10, at flip up. How do we get closer to 90 degrees? A task constraint might be we use a connection ball here and it needs to go forward as we're completing the throw. That would be a task constraint if we're trying to kind of shore up that forearm fly out piece. But there are a lot of things that we can do. So we're gonna talk about one specific kind of drill option that we use, or set of drill options that we use today, and they're called jump throws. All right, so if you think about this, it's exactly what it sounds like, jumping in the air and throwing the ball, a la Derek Jeter.
Hit toward the hole, Jeter backhands from the outfield grass. Got him!
All right, so when we're talking about jump throws, why is this kind of like a helpful drill? And so if we think about the throw, there's a series of blocks, right, throughout the throw. The most famous one, right, most well-known one being the lead leg block. But there's a bunch of these things that happen that kind of stop the movement at one body segment and accelerate the next body segment, right? This is essentially the summation of speed principle. In order for the next segment to be maximally accelerated, the previous segment has to be kind of fully decelerated, right? And so what we're looking at is these series of blocks throughout the body as, the kind of that wave of energy builds through it. The next piece is accelerated into ball release, all right? So what happens is when we take away that stability of being on the ground when we're throwing and we're in the air, all of a sudden we have to find a different way to kind of stabilize kind of this structure, right, to be able to throw hard. When coaches talk about, it's hard to fire a cannon out of a canoe, this is what they're talking about. We need stability in order to kind of move something maximally, right? So like if you think about kind of jumping out of sand versus jumping off of concrete, this is what you're talking about, right? We're losing a lot of that kind of energy as heat when we're just stabilizing ourselves rather than being able to go off of firm kind of ground like that. And this is kind of the same principle here. So what happens when we're in the air is essentially we have to use other things to kind of make the body stable to be able to have kind of these high outputs that we're looking for. And so what happens when we're in the air is that essentially like volleyball players do, they found a great way to do this. What they're gonna do is you're gonna use kind of these fascial slings to stabilize yourself. And so this is kind of, whether it's you're talking about fascial slings, with the anatomy trains kind of approach, or we're talking about the spinal engine type of approach. Really, we're talking about very similar things here. And what that is we're talking about kind of reciprocal motion. We're talking about kind of connective tissue stability. We're talking about, kind of center out approach, rotation, all of these things. All of these kind of approaches work together and kind of take things from one another. And so essentially what's happening is we're seeing kind of reciprocal motion, right? The kind of opposite hip goes one way, the opposite shoulder goes the other way. You see this when you're walking, when you're running, all of these things. And what's happening is we're kind of stretching across these fascial slings, and then we're getting this kind of release, this reflexive firing of these fascial slings. And so when we utilize jump throws, it's pretty easy to kind of not overcoach this and just get feedback from the throw itself. Because if we're really inefficient with this movement, one, you're going to cut the ball or you're going to rip it all over the place, or it's not going to make it as far as you think, or if we're using a radar gun, the number's going to be lower than you expect. So all of these things can give the athlete feedback without the coach having to do a whole lot in terms of driving the execution in this drill the way that we want it to be. And so, who is this drill right for? I would say probably everybody can use this drill without an issue. What the difference might be is what kind of regularity they're used with and in what situations, right? So like some guys may use this as a larger part of kind of their drill library and what they're focusing on. And other guys, it may be a smaller part kind of on a, differential learning type day, that kind of thing, where it's just mixed in there with some other kind of athletic throws, stuff they wouldn't normally do, just give them a broader array of movement solutions. With guys who really need to kind of solve this specific movement problem, whether it's kind of how the torso is moving relative to the pelvis or how the arm is moving relative to the torso, all of these things, right? Because we really want to see three kind of distinct segments, right? Pelvis goes, shoulders go, shoulder complex, and arms go. And so if we don't get that, jump throws can kind of move in there to kind of help us feel this more distinct segmentation. All right, so again, it's something probably worth playing with, mixing in. It's not necessarily going to be the perfect solution for everybody, but it is just one more kind of drill in the tool belt to kind of give us an opportunity to kind of make these movement changes that we're after with athletes who may be struggling with some of the other things. Thanks for watching. If you got any questions, feel free to drop them below, reach out via email, and I'll see you next time.